Now when you get to the music stand, can you hear me? You're going to take the newspaper and you're going to roll it up. And you're going to take your 2 rubber bands, okay? And you're going to keep that newspaper nice and tight, okay? So rubber band on one end and rubber band on the other end. Got it? Get as tight a roll as you can get. Got it? Then when you get through doing that, turn your stand so you have an armrest here, right? Which is what kids like to do. They fall asleep at the bass drum, pick their nose, whatever. You know, drop some pumpkin seeds in the holes, whatever. And and then you face me. So that's it. You got it exactly right, Steve. Give yourself some room, you know. That's it. Now the pass out is something you don't have to refer to. Got it? You don't have to refer to it. But that's background information. After you leave the workshop, you'll have the words from the percussion preacher here who will give you everything that you need to know. And that's it. So it's 2 o'clock. I have a lot of things to discuss and show you. If you're looking up here, I want to get some nomenclature in place. And if you look at your handout just before we start manipulating, I have a little blurb in there from the music from the Royal Fireworks. Bruce Pearson would be real happy with me to see that I'm using this, okay? And I indicated in the overture section how to notate areas on the bass drum that you would be using to play this. Because the bass drum, as most people use it, visualize it, whatever, it's a noisemaker. It's a pounder. And that's all that they do. So they play those note values all the same place. Hey, up, 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 up. And that's been going on for ages. That's just a cursory overview, okay? I could speak for 3 days on bass drum with all the things that need to be done in a workshop situation. In a clinic situation, I can only touch on a small part of performance, only a small part. And usually this is the part that the kids don't understand, and 9 times out of 10, the band directors don't understand because you didn't learn this in college, university, or any place else. So where did I learn it? 60 years ago, I had the opportunity of studying with Dr. Charles A. Hensey and Nilo Hovey. And those people were my mentors. Then Clarence Sawhill. Another one was the band director at Northwestern University, Cliff Bainham. When I joined ASBDA in '53 and we had ratified everything that Harris had put in place, we met in 1954 at the University of Illinois. And guess who the guest conductor was? Edwin Franco Goldman, my idol, my hero, who traded the bass drum with musicality. At the end of that meeting, we went to Chicago for the Midwest. I got a chance to ride in the same car with him from there to Chicago. I went, oh, I'm riding with the king. So I pumped him like crazy for every bit of information. You of course know he was a trumpet player, but you also know that he was the first trumpet player with a New York Symphony Orchestra. And his standmates hated him because he was going to take up the gauntlet for band directors. Oh, how could you do that? Become a band director. And they began to give him the raspberries. It was terrible. He had a horrible experience working with his standmates and the conductor. You're going to lower yourself from the orchestra to be a band director? And that's the way it went for years. Fortunately, that year, he passed away. Unfortunately, I should say. Fortunately for me, I had a chance to get close to him and read some books that he published way back in the dark ages. So all my premise about bass drum has to do with musicality. You know, he never conducted a march, you know. Most band directors just conduct crazy. So what the bass drum is doing, bass drummer doesn't need that. Bass drummer should phrase, and that's what he did. He conducted with his hand on his hip, and you go dee da down, boom, shh, and you just let the band. It's up to the band to keep the tempo, not the conductor. He didn't conduct. Yeah, on occasions he did, got flowery, and then he just stood there. That's all he did. He was poetry in motion. We don't need to give the band director, the bass drum player. He doesn't need that. If you've trained him right, he will watch you. Same way with Carl King. Carl King hated bass drummers because they couldn't watch him. They couldn't play. He'd go, boom. He'd go, how come you didn't hit the bass drum? Oh, watch my hand. What are you, a drummer or a musician? And all these things happen. And so as we go through this drill tonight, or this afternoon, I want you to experience, I want you to begin to think outside of the box. And why are the bass drum parts written the way they are written? Because those who write those parts don't know anything about writing bass drum. We still use bass drum on the march as if we were marching. In a concert hall, we don't march. So, you know, the kid bass drums back there, he doesn't know anything. He's bored to death anyway. Oh yeah, okay. He's bored to death. Until you say, watch me, listen, boom, a few things. So, is there any reason why percussionists, drummers, pardon the expression, can't use articulations? Do we ever teach a drummer to play staccato? Do we ever teach a drummer to play legato? Do we ever teach a drummer to play marcato? You talk to them and they go, what are you talking about? Boom, 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 boom. They don't know these articulation marks. And we have a bass drum. Do we only have to play at one place? There are 3 areas on a snare drum, 3 areas on a bass drum, 3 areas on a tom-tom. Timpani, of course, basically one area, but we graduate to a second area, and sometimes for effect we use the middle area, where the node is. This is the node. This is not a musical sound. That's not a musical sound. On snare drum, we use the nodal place because we want a dry, crisp sound. Okay? So we have to think about those things. Now, added to articulations are beating areas. Okay? Near center, midway, near edge. Those will give us ideas on how we can turn the phrase. It's called in Copeland's book, the agogic accent. The agogic accent, that's adding musical nuance to the rhythm or to the phrase. We don't use that with drummers. We treat drummers as drummers instead of as musicians because we don't train them to be musicians. We train them to be drummers. The reason why the marching band activity is so great, because they're out there drumming, they like to be active. Oh, ah! They like that. They're not milquetoast people. Now, to control this head, the other day, I forget which band was doing it, I saw one of the kids. I think it was the governor's band. I was just blown away by the way they were playing. All these young kids back here just, wow, wow. And I went and I said, you've got to have studied with somebody. Somebody coached you. Oh, yes. I said, who was that? And then they told me the percussion instructor's name and went, all the difference in the world. They were using left-hand dampening. They had things like that going on. Little things that enhanced the music they were playing. So they played with a lot of expression. Depending upon how the bass drum is tuned and the size of the bass drum, if you play near the center, sometimes you get a low sound, sometimes you get a high sound. Of course, this is a pitch area in between, and sometimes near the edge you get a high sound or a low sound. Again, depending upon how the bass drum, its size, how it's pitched, how it's tuned, and the quality of the head. There's so many different kinds of heads out there. Now, this head we know, we've heard it, it's tired. It's really tired. It needs to be replaced. Again, I could spend 3 hours just showing you how to replace that head and how to tune that head. I'm not going to take that time. Are you still with me? Okay. Time for a little commercial. As the chair of the Associate Membership Committee, I have the opportunity of working with music industry. And this clinic today is sponsored by Yamaha Corporation, in part, by Remo Head Corporation, and in part by ASBDA. I don't know whether you know it or not, but Yamaha Corporation was the first music industry company to support ASBDA. Goes back a long, long time ago. And that's when Educational Director Jim Herendeen came upon the scene, and Jim was a former band director for 20 some odd years, appointed Educational Director, and he went on. So all that is history.